Hi, and welcome to this next level AR tutorial. My name is Reda, and I'm excited to guide you through creating a stunning cinematic scene in Unreal Engine 5. We'll work on level art, composition, lighting, and more using the Blue City Asset Kit. But don't worry, if you're using a different kit, you can still follow along and apply the same techniques, whether you're new to Unreal Engine or looking to sharpen your skills. This tutorial will help you take your projects to the next level. Let's dive in. First of all, let me show you the cinematic video we're going to create during this tutorial. This will give you an idea of what we're working towards and help you visualize the final result. As you watch, pay attention to the camera movement, the lighting, and the overall composition. These are the key elements we'll focus on as we build this scene step by step. By the end of the tutorial, you'll be able to create something similar or even better using your own creativity and tools. To get started, head over to fab.com and search for the Blue City in the Environments section. You can purchase it and add it to your library. If you already have another kit, feel free to use that instead. Next, you'll need to download the Epic Games launcher. You can find it on the Epic Games website or simply search for Epic Games Launcher on Google. Once installed, open the launcher and navigate to your Fab library. Don't forget to refresh your library to see the newly added content. So, once the installation is complete, you can launch the project either from the Epic Games Launcher or directly from Windows Explorer. If you launch it from Windows Explorer, it automatically adds the project to your Epic Games Launcher library. Just click on the .u project file and wait a moment for it to load. Great. As you can see on my screen, I have the content browser in a separate window. To bring it up, just hit Ctrl plus space and it will pop up. If you'd like a floating window like mine, click on Dock in Layout and it will detach from the main interface. To add a second content browser, right-click here, go to the menu and check Content Browser 2 or Content Browser 3 if you need more. Usually it appears on my second screen. Alright, I'll delete this one for now. Since I have a wide screen, I like to organize my workspace with the content browser on the left and the Unreal 3D viewer on the right. To do this, first click on the Unreal 3D viewer, then press the Windows key plus right arrow. This snaps it to the right side of the screen. Next, click on the content browser and press Windows key plus left arrow to snap it to the left. If you have a second content browser, click on it and press Windows key plus left arrow followed by down arrow to position it neatly. Now, as you can see, I have my 3D viewer here on the right, my outliner on the far right, and my content browser on the left side of the screen. Perfect. This setup gives me a clear and efficient workspace. Right now, we have an empty black 3D viewport, but by the end of this step, we'll create something like what you see in this screenshot. First, go to Windows, then select ENV Light Mixer. In the Light Mixer, click on Skylight, Atmospheric Light, Sky Atmosphere, Volumetric Cloud, and Height Fog. Once you're done, close the Light Mixer window, and as you can see, we now have a beautiful blue sky with some clouds. To keep things tidy, let's organize all the atmosphere assets into a new folder. Simply right-click on the selected objects, choose Move To, and then Create New Folder. I'll name this folder Atmosphere, and that's it. Everything is now neatly organized. I'm going to move the selected asset just a little bit up. Make sure to save your level after this step. Save it in the Maps folder. I'll name it the Blue City Tutorial. Now, if you go to the Maps folder, you can see our level is saved here. Okay? Now we're going to create something that looks like this. By the way, if you place your cursor between the content browser window and the 3D viewer window, you can slide it left or right to adjust the window size. Next, I'll go to the Assets folder. In the search bar, I'll type ground, select it, and drag it into the 3D view. Then, in the Transform section of the Details panel, click the small reset arrow to place the mesh at 0, 0, 0, which is the center of the world. As you can see, there's a puddle texture visible on the ground mesh. We'll remove it by going into Mesh Paint mode. First, click Paint. Then select the red channel, hold Shift and right-click to erase the puddle texture. And that's it. You can now go back to selection mode. Right now, we're going to create a road with a sidewalk, add some buildings, vegetation, and so on. We'll work on some level art. In the Assets folder, you'll find all the static meshes, including balconies, windows, doors, and more. If you double-click on this static mesh, it will open a new window. Here you can see that the mesh has two materials, the wood material and the glass material. Now, if you want to edit one of these materials, for example, the trim wood material, just double click on it and it will open in a new window for further customization. Now, if you go to the Blueprints folder under Street Assets, you'll find some blueprints I've created, such as sidewalks. In the Buildings folder, you'll find house blueprints. So, what exactly is a blueprint? Blueprints in Unreal Engine are essentially templates or classes that combine components, scripts, and logic. Think of them as reusable objects that include both functionality and visuals. For example, a static mesh is a 3D model used in the game like a chair, rock, or building. When you create a blueprint with multiple static meshes, it means the blueprint contains several 3D models arranged and possibly configured in a specific way. These static meshes are components of the blueprint. Let me show you an example. If I open the blueprint house, go to the viewport and select a window, I can move it. As you can see, the window's position updates immediately in the Unreal 3D viewer. If I delete the window, it disappears from the 3D viewer as well. Each time you make changes to a blueprint, it's important to compile and save it. To save the entire project, you can press Ctrl plus Shift plus S. Today we're going to use blueprints and static meshes to work on level art. Level art is the process of designing and crafting the visual elements of a game environment to make it immersive, visually appealing, and aligned with the game's narrative and gameplay. It involves strategically placing assets like buildings, vegetation, props, and lighting within the game world to create environments that are both compelling and functional. By the end of this session, you'll have a better understanding of how to use these tools to bring your game environments to life. Now, I'm going to select the ground static mesh and set the grid to 100, which represents 1 meter. I'll move the mesh twice to the right, and as you can see, it snaps perfectly to the grid, moving 1 meter at a time. To duplicate the mesh, you can use Ctrl plus C and Ctrl plus V to copy and paste it, then move it to the left. Make sure you're using the Move tool. The shortcut for this is W. Once you have the two meshes, select both of them, then use Ctrl plus C and Ctrl plus V again to duplicate them. Alternatively, you can duplicate meshes by holding Alt and dragging them with the left mouse button. Feel free to use whichever method works best for you. Next, I'll select all of the meshes in the outliner, right-click, and move them to a new folder that I'll name Architecture. This keeps everything organized. Here's a helpful tip. I like to select all these meshes and group them. Grouping is a great trick for selecting and moving multiple objects together without having to reselect them every time. To group the objects, right-click and select Groups, or use the shortcut Alt plus G. Sorry, it's Control plus G and not Alt G. You can also unlock a group to modify it. For instance, you can grab and drag a static mesh, and by selecting the mesh and clicking the Add to Group button, it will become part of the group. If you lock the group again, the balcony or any other added object will now be part of it. I really like working with groups because they help speed up my workflow and make the process much more efficient. If you want to delete a group, right-click on it, tick Apply to All, and then Delete. This ensures all the meshes within the group are deleted together. If you don't tick this option, the meshes will be deleted one by one, which can be quite tedious. Now go ahead and duplicate the groups again Don't forget to save your progress from time to time by pressing Ctrl plus Shift plus S. To free up some workspace, I'll hide the filters. Next, I'll go to the Street Assets folder and grab Sidewalk 01. I'll drag it into the 3D viewport. Let me quickly explain how I created this sidewalk blueprint. First, go to the Assets folder, search for the sidewalk static mesh, and drag it into the scene. Then, find the stairs rock in the content browser and add it to the scene as well. Make sure to activate the rotation grid snap and set the value to 90 degrees. Quick tip. By hitting End on your keyboard while placing a mesh, the selected mesh will snap to the mesh directly beneath it. I think I scaled them a bit, so make sure you click on the lock icon to maintain a uniform scale while adjusting. Once you're done placing your meshes, select all of them, go to the blueprint icon and click on Convert Selection to Blueprint. In the pop-up, choose Harvest Components and name your blueprint. By the way, it's a good habit to maintain a clear naming convention. For example, use prefixes like BP underscore for blueprints, M underscore for materials, and T underscore for textures. Since this is just a test, I'll name it BP underscore sidewalk test and place it in the Street Assets folder. Once the blueprint is created, the blueprint editor window will open. So let's delete those blueprints. We don't need them anymore. Now let's move this new object to the architecture folder to keep everything organized. Here's something to note. Groups are marked with this icon. Blueprints have a sphere icon, and static meshes are represented by a small brick icon. When you select a mesh or blueprint in the 3D viewport, you can right-click on it and choose Browse to Asset. Alternatively, you can use the shortcut Ctrl plus B, and it will instantly take you to the Assets folder location in the content browser. So now we're going to start building our scene. First, I'll drag and drop Sidewalk 03 into the 3D viewport To align it precisely, I'll copy the location of the first sidewalk and paste it onto this one. Then I'll change the grid snap value to 101 meter and I'll move the sidewalk to its correct position. Next, I'll select all three sidewalks and duplicate them. After that, I'll group them together to keep things organized. Now I'll select the first group and using the control shortcut, also select the second group. I'll duplicate them, rotate them, and place them on the opposite side of the scene. I'm heading to the content browser to find the sidewalk static mesh. I'll add it to the scene to make the sidewalk larger. Once it's in place, I'll start duplicating the meshes and arranging them as shown on my screen. As a reminder, to duplicate, you can use Ctrl+C and Ctrl+V for quick and easy copying. Now we're going to start adding some beautiful buildings to the scene. In the Blue City kit, you'll find many blueprint houses, but you can also create your own. Let's drag and drop this one into the level. Next, let's look for some vegetation asset blueprints and place them in the scene. If any objects are floating, don't forget to press End on your keyboard to snap them to the floor. Let's search for an arch asset. We'll use this one. From time to time, refer to the image reference. You can find this image on my website through the link in the description. Now start working on your composition by placing houses and assets into the level. Feel free to be creative and come up with your own arrangement if you prefer. Let's also add some street lights to the scene. As you can see, I have two street light blueprints, one with lights and an emissive texture and another without. I typically use the non-emissive one during the day and the emissive one at night. You press Alt plus L, you can rotate the sunlight and switch between daytime and nighttime. When I switch to nighttime, you'll notice that Street Lamp 02 has lights and an emissive texture, making it ideal for evening scenes. For this tutorial, we're going to use Street Lamp 02. Let's continue placing, moving, and rotating assets in the scene to build out our environment. In the vegetation folder, under the blueprint subfolder, you'll find some palm tree blueprints. Grab a few and start placing them into the scene to add more greenery and life. You might notice some variation in the ground texture. That's because I used Vertex painting to mix multiple textures. This technique helps break up repetitive patterns and makes the scene feel more natural. To try this yourself, select the floor and go to the Mesh Paint tool. Start painting on the surface and switch between the green, red, and blue channels. Each channel represents a different texture. For example, the blue channel will let you paint puddles. If you press Alt while painting, you can erase the top texture layer to reveal the one underneath. You can also switch between paint and erase modes to refine your work. Experiment with the strength and size settings to control the intensity and size of your strokes. Keep exploring the possibilities with Vertex painting. It's a great way to add subtle details and variety to your scene. So let's add another building to the scene. You can, of course, choose whichever building you like. If you want to create a variation of a building, for example, make a larger one, here's how you can do it. Select the building you want to modify, press Ctrl+B to locate it in the content browser, click twice on the blueprint to open the blueprint editor, and then switch to the viewport tab. Before making any changes, duplicate the blueprint and give it a new name. To duplicate, select the asset and click on Ctrl+D. For this tutorial, I'll add _tutorial to the end of the name to keep it organized. Now, back in the viewport, I'll select the meshes, move them to the right and duplicate them to start creating a larger version of the house. Once the changes are made, I'll drag the new blueprint into the map to see the updates in real time. Next, I'm going to add a door. To do this, make sure you select the shared route in the blueprint hierarchy. Then go to the Assets folder in the content browser, find the door, and drag and drop it into the blueprint. Adjust its rotation and position until it's perfectly placed. Using this process, you can create multiple house variations by duplicating and modifying the blueprints. Just remember to compile and save your changes. You can also do some vertex painting directly on your blueprint. For example, here I'm going to paint to blend the seam. Go to Mesh Paint, select the green channel, and start painting. Switch to the red channel to add some plaster or other textures. Personally, I prefer doing my vertex painting on meshes before converting them to blueprints. For some reason, the painting process tends to be much slower once they're part of a blueprint. Let me show you an example of how I create my blueprints. First, I'll grab some walls from the content browser. I'll adjust the sunlight a bit to make the normal map details stand out better. Remember, you can use Shift plus L and move the mouse to rotate the sunlight. Next, I'll duplicate the walls and swap one of them from a solid wall to a wall window. Then I'll search for windows in the contents browser and I'll place them into the scene. Step by step, you can continue adding elements and building up your structure. Now we're going to change the material at the bottom of the wall. Select the wall, go to the material section in the details tab and click on the folder icon to locate the material in the contents browser. Once you've found it, look for MI Plaster Wall Blue 01 and drag it onto the wall. Next, select all the meshes and go to the Mesh Paint tool. Choose the red channel and start painting to add some variation and blend the seam between the two textures. If you switch to the green channel, you'll be able to paint bricks onto the surface. Look for roofs in the Assets folder and start placing them above the house. I've already placed the right side, so now grab the left side and position it in the level. To ensure precise alignment, copy the position of the right side and paste it onto the left side. Since both sides share the same pivot position, they'll snap into place right away. Once the roof is in place, add the small window roofs above the windows. Duplicate them and tweak their placement as needed. Remember, objects in real life, especially in older buildings, aren't perfectly symmetrical. Adding slight rotations can bring more realism to your scene. To make this easier, turn off proportional rotation before rotating the window roofs. This will help you make finer adjustments without snapping to 90-degree angles. Now, go to the vegetation folder, grab some corner ivy and place it on the building. Don't forget to re-enable proportional editing for smoother adjustments. When working with multiple assets, it's a good idea to group them for easier management. Use Ctrl plus G to group the selected meshes. Now they're grouped, right? Much easier to handle. Once you're happy with your grouping, click on the blueprint icon and select Convert Selection to Blueprint. Choose Harvest Component, give it a meaningful name, and save it in the Blueprints folder. Next, let's add the corner wall we forgot earlier. Once added, be sure to compile and save your blueprint. If you drag and drop the blueprint into the scene now, you'll notice that half of the mesh is under the ground. This happens because the pivot axis is located in the middle of the blueprint. To fix this, open the blueprint, switch to left view, select all the 3D meshes, and move them into the correct position above the ground. Save your changes. Now, when I drag the house blueprint into the scene, it snaps perfectly onto the floor. Everything looks just right. I'm now going to continue placing the selected assets and working on the composition as shown in the screenshot. Take your time to do the same on your side, and once you're done, let's meet in the second part of this tutorial. In the next section, we'll dive into creating some exterior lighting in Unreal Engine 5 and really bring the scene to life. I hope you found this first part enriching. Don't forget to save your progress, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free to share them below. If you enjoyed this tutorial, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next part. Thanks for following along, and I'll see you in the second part.